Now, Lebanon's army says 3 of its soldiers have been killed by Israeli fire in the south of the country. The United States says it's expressed concerns to Israel about the safety of Lebanese soldiers and United Nations peacekeepers in Lebanon. This as Israel carried out more airstrikes on positions it said belonged to Hezbollah militants.
Beirut rocked awake as Israel pounds the city's southern suburbs. Several buildings have been destroyed in what Lebanese state media describes as the most violent raids in the past month. The wave of strikes comes as Israel intensifies its attacks on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Like here, in the coastal city of Dahiyeh, the city center lies in ruins. Once a vibrant area, popular with tourists. The Israeli military issued evacuation warnings here a couple of hours prior to the strikes.
We were sitting and suddenly bombs started falling on us, shell after shell. Thank God we are all well and no one was wounded. The missiles were strange. It was unbelievable. It was the first time we heard these sounds. The sound was terrible, really terrible.
Meanwhile, explosions were seen above Tel Aviv. Israel says it intercepted dozens of rockets fired by Hezbollah. And tensions in the region continue to rise as Israel and Hezbollah enter the second month of an all-out war.
A short while ago, I spoke with Beirut-based journalist Stella Mena. She gave us the latest on those overnight strikes.
So here in Beirut, we have witnessed yet another very violent night. The Israeli army has carried out at least 17 airstrikes here in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Local media is reporting that at least 6 buildings have completely flattened during these attacks. The Israeli army also continued airstrikes in other parts of the country, like in the Bekaa Valley in the east or in the south of the country. The Lebanese army also said that Israel forces have killed 3 of their soldiers. Well, it's very important here to highlight that the Lebanese army is not involved in this war. It is deployed in South Lebanon, but it has a monitoring role there together with the UN peacekeeping troops, and it is also there to help civilians in rescue missions. And this is exactly how these 3 soldiers were killed. They were in a village trying to evacuate wounded people. At the same time, Hezbollah is also firing back rockets towards Israel. The Israeli army said that at least 4 rockets have been sent during the night heading towards Tel Aviv.
Now, Israel claims that it tries to minimize civilian casualties by issuing preemptive evacuation orders in areas where it's bombing. Is that always the case, Stella, and how effective is that policy?
It is true that Israel is sending out these warnings. It's sending out like little blue maps where buildings and areas are targeted or marked that they will target. But it is very important to say that this is not always the case. We've seen this again last night when the Israeli army just targeted a building in Jnah here in the southern suburbs of Beirut without any warning. And this does happen quite often as well. It is also important to mention that these warnings are not always correct. So a couple of days ago, we had the case that on the maps that were sent out by the Israeli army, it looked like they wanted to target a building near the ABC in Verdun, which is a very big shopping mall that's very popular, has a lot of Western brands in it, and people were going crazy. And then they realized that there was a little bit of a confusion and that there was a mistake in these maps. Another thing that's worth noticing is that the evacuation warnings are not always coming with a lot of time in advance. So sometimes they're only like 20 minutes between sending out these warnings and the strike, which makes it really hard for civilians to evacuate, especially because it's in the middle of the night and sometimes people have to wake up their children and get ready to evacuate.
Stella, thank you very much. That was journalist Stella Mena in Beirut. Well, for more on the humanitarian situation in Lebanon, I'm joined now by Shaki Amin Adine. He's a humanitarian affairs advisor for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Lebanon and joins us from Beirut. Thanks for being with us. Shaki, more than 1 million people have been displaced so far in Lebanon. What's it like for those on the ground there trying to flee the conflict?
Good morning. So the humanitarian situation in Lebanon, already mentioned, we are talking about over 1 million, actually 1.2 million people that have been displaced from the southern Lebanon, from Bekaa, and even from the southern suburbs of Beirut. These people are actually struggling on a daily basis to ensure access to basic and essential needs, such as food, water, shelter, and even emergency healthcare. If you look around in Lebanon, it has not been uncommon to see streets with tents, people sleeping directly on the streets because they do not have access to shelters. It's very common to see groups of children trying to bath even in seawater. And with this, again, the humanitarian situation as a whole is becoming more and more dire as more people are being displaced from additional places all over Lebanon.
How is the Red Cross and other aid organizations able to provide aid to the people there who really need it in these horrible circumstances?
Unfortunately, the humanitarian needs are massive. The International Committee of the Red Cross has been at the forefront of responding to this escalation in conflict. We have been focusing on, since October last year, we have been focusing on responding within the 0 to 5 kilometer zone, ensuring that people who were affected have access to essential services. However, given the recent escalation and the massive internal displacement, which is unprecedented, the International Committee of the Red Cross shifted its focus. So now we're working to ensure that people have access to healthcare. We're deploying trauma centers to ensure access to emergency management of the war wounded. We are ensuring and advocating for the protection of civilian population by calling on parties and reminding them of their obligations to respect international humanitarian law. And we're also assisting by providing access to essential services, to food, water, medication for all those that have been affected by the ongoing conflict.
Well, as we speak, an international conference is getting underway in Paris on Lebanon. It's aiming to try to provide aid and maybe work towards a ceasefire. What are your expectations regarding that Lebanon conference in France?
Look, as I mentioned earlier, the humanitarian needs are massive. No single humanitarian actor can address these needs or be able to respond adequately. That's why this coordination and any type of support, in addition to ensuring a continuous access of humanitarian aid to Lebanon, ensuring access of humanitarian workers to the areas that are affected by the conflict to be able to reach the people, would be an absolute need, would be an absolute necessity in order to ensure an effective and impactful response. This conference that's happening today hopefully would solicit and provide additional support to the population of Lebanon and provide them with the means and the relief items needed that in order to continue or in order to satisfy the basic needs that they are facing.
Shaki, thank you very much for talking with us today. That was Shaki Amin Adine in Lebanon.